Oh my god, I swear to God, get the out of my face. Seriously?
Robert! You ain't the homie, this ain't for you. Ain't chasing paper, this ain't for you. You know what we came to do. Hey, you know what we came to do. Look, I'm in a league of my own. Y'all need to leave it alone. I'ma just eat everything. I'ma just leave you the bones. Call it an even exchange. There ain't no need to explain. Yeah, it should be overstood. Like when I hop on a plane and I fly over your hood. Y'all should be knocking on wood. Don't make me go against the grain. I ate my Wheaties, I'm good.
Oh my.
All right. Welcome back to the HBCU Flicks Show. It's your boy Kelly Flicks. Let's do this for another episode. This is episode 2. I'd like to thank everybody that liked, subscribed, even commented on my last video. I appreciate all the feedback I got. It was lovely. Let's keep it rolling to the next week, right? Last week was very fun. We got into a bunch of spring games, but this past Saturday was jam-packed with action. I'm talking about 18 HBCU spring games happened this weekend. There's no way I'm going to be able to get to all of them, but we'll try our best, right? I'll let you guys know right now, I won't be able to get into any MEAC teams. We'll talk Howard and North Carolina Central another time. But let's get into some tweets. This past week, homie Ken Clark hit me back in replies. Has something to say about some California kids, right? There are 3 Californians right now at Jackson State. Brandon Johnson from Oceanside. It's down in San Diego area. We got Josiah Roa Davis, that's in the Bay Area, Northern California. Then you got Julius Reynolds out of Modesto. Do the bunny hop. Okay, so in this tweet, he was replying to my tweet because I made mention of how many HBCU players are from California and on what team they're from. And funny enough, Grambling State has 10 players from California. They lost a couple players, including Maurice Washington, who's actually from the Bay Area, but they have 10 players. Floyd Chalk, Tyson Bordeaux, a bunch of ballers, right? A lot of guys that played early. And after the 10 players, it falls off pretty sharply. There are about 5 or 6 teams who are tied with 3 Californian players. I'll be starting the 323 show, the interview show for Thursdays pretty soon. If you're an athlete from California, you want to hop on the show, talk a little bit and share your experiences, let me know. Now, let's get into the playbook, man. What's the playbook for today? What's the game plan, Flicks? What are we going to do? What are we talking about, right? Well, top of the show, we're talking about Florida A&M and their spring game. They brought 200 recruits to their spring game. They know what they're doing down there. Now, next we're going to the future of Jackson State, talk about their offense a little bit and who we can count on, who we can depend on going into the fall. And we'll also speak about some coaching changes. We have some coordinator changes. There's a new offensive coordinator at Winston-Salem State. We have a new director of football at Alabama State, Coach Terry Sims, former head coach from Bethune-Cookman, now goes to Alabama State and will be the director of football operations. And we have our CIAA big quarterback battle with Shaw. There's a battle between Christian Peters and transfer quarterback Silas Cruz from Livingston. It's a pretty big matchup. We'll get into it. But first, let's talk about them Rattlers, right? Why not talk about the Rattlers? Why not talk about FAMU? Going into this offseason, this seems to be another big offseason for Florida A&M, right? While they've been in the SWAC in these past 2 years since COVID, they actually have fared pretty well. They've actually only lost to one opponent, and that's Jackson State. Their record is 18-5 overall in the past 2 years. The job that Willie Simmons has done has not been applauded enough. I'm sure about FAMU fans. I know y'all love y'all Willie Simmons, but to the west of the watching public, the casuals, Willie Simmons is doing a phenomenal job at FAMU and keeping the boat afloat and continuing to be contenders for now a 3rd straight year, right? So within this dark cloud defense, this is the defense that nobody wants to go against, right? The Marquise Bell defense, the Isaiah Land defense, Isaiah Major and Kamari Stevens now will run this defense. They're going to be the 2 stars on this defense. They're going to be the guys that make this thing go. They have so many returners this year for Florida A&M. They are very deep at pretty much every position, and they return a lot of injured guys, right? So let's get into it, right? Isaiah Major and Kamari Stevens, as I mentioned, are going to replace some of those key guys. We got Javon Morgan, safety, who's been at Florida A&M now. He's now a graduate student. Great safety. Is going to be returning for them. At cornerback, we're talking about Kendall Bowler, brother of B.J. Bowler, and we're talking about Kamani King, former transfer from Iowa State. And his buddy who transferred with him, Eric Horn, will also now be available during this fall. He didn't play last year. So FAMU gets to bring back another piece to this Dark Cloud defense. This Dark Cloud defense welcomes back Jordan Moore, a former 4-star safety who has now transitioned to linebacker for FAMU. I'm talking about a very skilled linebacking core and a front seven that is becoming more and more switchable. If we're being real, they can all move around at their own rate. And speaking of switchable, on the defensive line, you're going to talk about Kamari Stevens, one of the top defensive linemen in the SWAC this year. He's going to be teamed up with General Hunt, who did not play during the spring game and did not practice during spring practice. Teamed them up with Dre Jones, and you got some action down there on that defense. That Florida A&M defense could be scary this year. Isaiah Major, to me, was the SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, right? If it wasn't for Albie Miller, a couple other guys, he's a shoo-in for that spot. This year, I can see him taking it again, right? I can see him back in that same spot, back up in there in that same contention of top 3 players that are the best defenders in the SWAC. So let's get into the the Florida A&M Spring Game. Very fun spring game, by the way. Went into triple overtime, if you didn't know. This was probably one of the most competitive spring games I've seen in some time. I want to give a big shout out to Kyle Logan down at WTXL Tallahassee. They do a great job in feeding these different games and different highlights. So off the opening drive, man, Jeremy Musa looked very good. To keep it a buck, Jeremy Musa looked the part. He's been looking the part. This is his touchdown to win the game. Jeremy Musa and his progression at FAMU is really going to determine how far this FAMU team goes, right? And last year, that's what I thought would be the case for Jeremy Musa, but I think that Jackson State was that nail in the road for them. This year coming up, Jackson State is still there, but there's no Coach Prime, don't get me wrong. This is a different team. I think FAMU at this point is in the driver's seat, and they have everything to play for at this point. They have a very strong team full of seniors and senior leadership. The experience alone in the SWAC helps Florida A&M greatly over a lot of other teams in the SWAC East. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Florida A&M make another run and do what they always do in the SWAC. So next, we'll get into a team that is always in contention. Always in contention. That's Jackson State. This offseason, they lost 43 players. 43 players. And somehow, they're still in contention for the SWAC. This SWAC spring game, shout out to Jackson State and what they did with their sports network. I gladly paid that $10 to check out the game. It was great coverage. It was a comprehensive presentation for about an hour and 20 minutes. I loved every second of it. Now, who is going to be your stable pieces for Jackson State this year, right? Who's going to be the guys we can count on? J.D. Martin, running back for Jackson State. He was there last year. Another guy that stayed. He's him at running back. He's him. There's a lot of questions since Sevion Wilkerson seems to be in the transfer portal, but J.D. Martin looks the part. Rico Powers, another guy who stayed at Jackson State, did not enter the portal, is the guy at wide receiver. He's wide receiver 1 in Jackson State by far, right? And then we got Seven McGee, our gadget guy. He's a running back and a receiver. Plays a slot, caught a very big pass early in the game. Seven McGee is going to be problems for a lot of different defenses because of where he can line up, which is everywhere. You could throw him at H-back, slide him at H-back and sitting out there for a wheel, right? You could put him, you can hand him the ball running back. You can bring him on jet sweeps. You can have him line up in the slot and run routes for you. Seven McGee is going to be a game changer for this Jackson State offense and for offensive coordinator Maurice Harris. Now, the next biggest question, right? I named a couple guys that are most consistent. Notice there are no quarterbacks on this list, right? The quarterback battle is still going on. A couple people have given the job to Jason Brown, But I think we got to call a spade, man. We got to call a spade. Your boy Grayson Thompson looked good. He looked good. Let's check out some highlights. Shout out to Blake Levine and what he did, giving us some early JSU spring highlights. We got to see a bunch of different quarterbacks. Got to see Philip Short out there. We did not get to see Zy McDonald. Zy McDonald still injured. He won't be out there. But we did get to see the incumbent, Jason Brown, down there slinging some passes around. He looked pretty good. Jason Brown, to me, looks the part of the starting quarterback. He went 5 for 9, 120 yards, 1 interception, and was sacked 3 times. Plenty of questions. There's a beautiful pass by Grayson Thompson there. Grayson Thompson is another guy that stayed on the team, didn't hop into the portal, stayed on Jackson State, and he's a quarterback that has great touch. When you're a quarterback that has great touch and an offense that has a very good vertical passing game, you're going to shine in games like this. In games where you can take advantage of defenders, possibly even young defenders out there, you're going to shine. So let's get on to this defense. I think this offensive quarterback battle is going to go on throughout the summer. I don't think it stops anytime soon. As far as defense, though, I like the Jackson State defense. I think that their only holes are at linebacker. I saw that on offense, Jackson State ran the ball very well. And then looking at those rushing lanes, a lot of the guys up front, like Niles Gaddy, they are in their gaps. Some linebackers aren't filling their gaps, which is the problem. Because in watching Jackson State's offense, Coach Maurice Harris said that the most important positions are going to be quarterback and tight end. And I think part of that is because their running game is so particularly based on power run type plays. We're talking about right guards pulling constantly throughout this offense. If you can ask any Jackson State guard from last year, I'm sure they didn't even pull in practice. Okay, this is a totally different offense. It's a different approach to offensive philosophy. And Coach Maurice Harris is going to bring a different type of wrinkle to the SWAC. He's going to bring more of a power run game, quick passing game, and a very good vertical passing game. And speaking and throwing those negative yards passes, he throws a lot of screens. We're going to see a lot of screens for Jackson State. We're going to see a lot of misdirection from Jackson State. Now, back to the defense, though. I like the defense. I like the safeties. Esias Guthrie looks good. Key Drain looks good back there. Tim Seward also looks good back there at DB. I think when it comes to your defensive line and your DBs as far as Jackson State, you look pretty good. There's a couple blown coverages out at corner, but I think that comes with the territory. I think Coach Maurice Harris is that good. Being real, I think he's that good. He manipulates defenses. That's what he does for a living. He will move you out of your position and provide a great game plan for great plays and for the quarterback to make plays. And I think that's what happened during the spring game. A fun spring game. Don't get to see much scoring in spring games usually, but we did in this one, right? So let's move it on. Let's go to Tennessee State spring game. Another fun spring game filled with great defense. This Tennessee State defense is a top-of-the-line defense. They will be probably the top defense in the Big South OVC, the merger that they're doing this year, right? So for this Tennessee State defense, they're coached by Brendan Fisher, Jeff Fisher's son. He's a defensive coordinator for Eddie George. He's been there since 2021. Now I feel like his defensive strategy and his defensive philosophy is beginning to pay dividends. I saw last year versus Jackson State, their game, and really in a couple other games, especially in the Eastern Washington game, the defense showed a bend, don't break type of attitude, and they're turnover-based. Brendan Fraser's best teams at Southern Utah were turnover-based, right? Getting a lot of interceptions, takeaways, stopping the ball. Brandon Fisher and what he does on defense usually is cause a lot of ruckus, cause a lot of problems, make it hard for the offense to read the defense. And in his defense now, he has plenty of guys that can switch and alternate positions to really work the best for Tennessee State. We're talking about a couple transfers. We got Jalen Bill, a transfer out of the SWAC, all SWAC, might I add, from Mississippi Valley at defensive line, moving up to Tennessee State to go pair with Terrell Allen, all OVC defensive lineman for Tennessee State. And we're talking about another SWAC linebacker, Moreau Beard from University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, moving over to Tennessee State, pairing with Kayvon Pope, another all OVC player. It's kind of a trend here. And even at the defensive back core, you bring back Bryce Phillips, California native, at cornerback, who is an all-OVC player, right? Opposite of him is Jayshawn Watkins. Jayshawn Watkins only got to play 7 games last year. He was injured, couldn't finish the year. He comes back. He had a great season last year, though. This Tennessee State team is primed for a great defensive year. Offensively, with Draylon Ellis, they'll always have a chance. I cannot count out Tennessee State as long as they have Draylon Ellis at the head at quarterback. Now, this weekend, Draylon Ellis actually did not participate in the games. Draylon Ellis right now was held out because of academic reasons. I'm not sure on the details of those, but it did provide a new wrinkle for the Tennessee State spring game. Tennessee State spring game was led by backup quarterbacks. And they did their thing, right? We got to see Heath Will down here do his thing and throw a nice pass to Kanan Adrian. Now, Kanan Adrian, nice receiver, who looks to be one of the top guys at Tennessee State going into the fall. A transfer wide receiver out of Blinn College, a junior college. He comes in, and I've heard he's made an instant impact for his Tennessee State team. And to me, Draylon Ellis has needed a go-to guy, and he kind of had it last year with J.J. Holloman. The biggest problem was the offensive line. He didn't have enough time to get the ball out. A lot of times he was getting sacked, or he's like running for his life. So at this point, Coach Eddie George goes, okay, I see that. He's brought in 5 offensive linemen during this recruiting cycle to protect Draylon Ellis, to protect Demetric Crenshaw, to protect Heath. This Tennessee State team seems primed. I really felt like Coach Eddie George may have been ready last year, but this year you retain a lot of players, don't lose many players to the transfer portal, and I feel like more and more so guys are buying in. I'd like to give a huge shout out, man, to Blue Bloods. The Blue Bloods and what he did in interviewing most of the Tennessee State defense gave great insight into how they're feeling and how they are digesting this defense from Brendan Fisher. So Tennessee State spring game was very fun nonetheless. Very fun. Great to see it. Got to see a bunch of highlights. The game was actually not streamed, so taking a lot from the notes. Next up, we're going to get into something big, y'all. Something pretty big, and that's coaching changes. We have a bunch of coaching changes, right? It doesn't have to be the head guy to make a big difference within a program. So these are some big coaches that made big moves this offseason. Let's talk about Chris Barnette. Chris Barnette comes from a championship pedigree. Coach Rob Broadway. And at North Carolina A&T and what they've done in Celebration Bowls, Chris Barnette was a part of all of that. Tariq Cohen, he was a part of all of that. Sam Washington, Jump Ball U, he was a part of all of that. He is in that same timeline. You see what the ilk that he's coming from? He's coming from championship pedigree. Chris Barnette, offensive coordinator, will now be joining Winston-Salem State as offensive coordinator, same role that he had at North Carolina A&T last year. Chris Barnette has shown that he can develop great running backs, i.e. the Tariq Cohens, Bashir Tutens. I mean, just look around. Go take a dive into the stat leaders of the past 5 years for North Carolina A&T, and you'll find some dogs. Chris Barnette runs a very good offense, a very smooth offense, and quite honestly, this is what Winston-Salem State needs on offense. Winston-Salem State has underachieved. Last year, underachieved greatly. Start off the year 0-5, right? You save your season, go 4-6. But the offense for Winston-Salem State was never there the entire year. Their leading receiver had 21 catches for 300 yards through 11 games. Yeah, I know. Their offense, 17 points a game. That's not going to win many games. 178 yards a game. In fact, their previous offensive coordinator is currently not even working in football anymore. He's actually working in a construction company. So this is night and day difference for the Winston-Salem State team. This could ignite a flame. This is still the same region that Chris Barnette has already worked in, so you got to imagine his recruiting network is still somewhat the same. He can provide a necessary boost for this Winston-Salem State team. Moving on to another very big move. Coach Terry Sims The former head coach from Bethune-Cookman moves on to Alabama State, right? Goes on to Alabama State. But get this, he doesn't take a coordinator role. He is now the director of football operations at Alabama State. This is more of a hands-off approach. If we're talking about somebody that's been a coach and has been in the war room and in the film room, it's not much of that. This is more on the administrative side. He is the administrative liaison for the football team. He's going to deal with compliance, facilities, training staff, equipment managers, communications, marketing, and organizations, right? So Terry Sims will get to kick his feet up a little bit, but I think he'll also work as, how should I put this? He could work as a mentor to Coach Eddie Robinson down there in Alabama State. I think he could give the correct insight to help Coach Eddie Rob really get things together down for Alabama, get things together at Alabama State. I think Alabama State may have been missing some things on offense last year. Coach Terry Sims became coach at Bethune-Cookman back in 2010, right? He has so much information, so much knowledge he could give the new coach, the new young coach, head coach. This is Coach Eddie Robinson's second year as a head coach on any level. I don't think that he shied away from the help, and he brought in Terry Sims as somebody that he could speak to and bounce ideas off of. Coach Terry Sims, and what happened at Bethune-Cookman was unfortunate, where he had to move and the team got much worse very fast, right? Then the move was needed. It's good for both sides. But I think this is another good move for Terry Sims, staying in the SWAC still and still having an impact on SWAC games. And then lastly, we got one of the GOATs, Willie Totten, one of the GOATs, one of the best quarterbacks in NCAA history. He holds 50 NCAA records. If you remember Jerry Rice, there's a dude throwing to him who was doing numbers also. And that's this guy, Willie Totten. He did his thing. He has a couple fields named after him, a couple awards named after him. He's the man. The past 4 years, though, he's been the quarterback coach at Mississippi Valley State University. While there, you got to Coach Jelani Eason, coach other players on this Mississippi Valley team while he was there at his alma mater. Now, in this past spring, Coach Eric Dooley of Southern decided to bring Coach Willie Totten on to the staff, right? Mississippi Valley last year, head coach Vincent Dancy moved on to Colorado, leaving a lot of those coordinators in limbo. Some stayed with Kendrick Wade down there at Mississippi Valley. Others, like the legendary Coach Willie Totten, took a hike, went up to Southern, and as Coach Eric Dooley said, whenever he had a time that made sense for him to bring in Coach Willie Totten, he would do it, and he did it. The blink of an eye, he did it. I think that this is what's going to be needed in this quarterback room to figure out who's the number one. I think sometimes it takes a great to find a great. We have a bunch of good quarterbacks in the Southern quarterback room this year. 5 quarterbacks. I talked about them last week. Dylan Mahorta, Jalen Woods, CSET, Noah Bowden, the starter, Harold Blood. The list goes on and on, right? Very deep list. But in order to find that quarterback, a lot of times, you need a guy with some good eyes who can check out techniques, a guy who has been there and who has done it. And I think Willie Totten might be the guy to really fish out the number one quarterback at Southern. Yet to be seen. This is his first spring with the staff. This will be a fun ride, and I like that Southern keeps a guy of, one of the greatest players of all time on their coaching staff. That's the best way to put it. All right, so let's get into talking about quarterbacks. We got more quarterback battles, right? We got more beef. We got more head-to-head matchups. We're talking about Christian Peters, quarterback of Shaw University, returning quarterback of Shaw University, who's now a redshirt sophomore, who's going head-to-head against Livingston transfer Silas Cruz. It's a big battle, pretty big battle. 2 conflicting styles, right? You ever seen a great boxing match with 2 fighters and you go, well, he's good at knocking dudes out. He's good with the jab, he's good with the hook, whatever. These are 2 totally different styles. Christian Peters likes to use his legs. He uses his legs to his advantage quite often, and he used them at this spring game. Ran for a 75-yard touchdown in the 4th quarter. He's shown that what he can do with his legs can be the it factor for him. Spoke last week about the it factor and some quarterbacks that have it, some quarterbacks that don't. Christian Peters is showing that he has it. I thought this was a big year for Christian Peters and his development, And in watching his development, the biggest step was his decisiveness. He is much less indecisive this year. This year, he takes the chances he needs. He moves the ball down the field, and he uses his legs to his advantage. He's one of the fastest guys on the field when he touches the field at quarterback. He has a great arm, great accuracy, but while he's moving, when he's moving, extending plays, when he's moving on quarterback draws, he gets past guys. He'll run right by you. So let's take a look at some Shaw University spring game highlights. Shout out to HBCU Red Zone, everything they do. Shout out to Moody Athletics, what he does. It's going to be a little skinny video. It's going to be super skinny, but bear with me, y'all. Bear with me. This is some Shaw highlight. Oh, sorry, it's not Shaw highlights. Sorry about that, guys. We'll bring up the Shaw highlights. I'll bring them up. Don't worry. Bam, bam. Here's some Shaw highlights for you guys. Show off some of the spring game. Didn't see many news publications talking about it, but my guys at HBC Red Zone, as always, have coverage of the game. As Silas Cruz, number 7, made a couple good throws. Can't blame him. This was a pretty good spring game for the entire Shaw offense, right? This entire Shaw offense ended up, let's get this right now, ended up going for 442 yards of total offense in this spring game. I mean, I don't know if that's an indictment on the defense or if the offense is that damn good, because wow. 442 yards as the offense in the spring is unheard of. Usually the O-line or the D-line, one is so bad or so good that a game like this can't happen. But I think we saw 2 quarterbacks out there competing. That's a dime right there by Christian Peters. 2 quarterbacks out there competing, play in and play out, and it led to a lot of big plays on the field. It led to other players around them stepping up, receivers stepping up, DB stepping up, linemen stepping up. There's something about a scoring offense that puts the pressure and the onus on the entire 11 that's on the field to not only execute, but run plays correctly and run them at a high tempo. I think this Shaw team, they were moving around fast, very fast during the spring game. It looked like a lot of guys were very familiar with their playbooks. There was no half stepping. There's all right, look, there's a lot of times, my old offensive coordinator would tell me this. There's a lot of times as an 11, that are out there on the field, you need all 11 guys to run the same play. Some of the greatest coaches could only get them to run the same play maybe about 84% of the time. Get 84% of the guys, those 11, to run the correct play, right? Some guys might be running a different play. Some guys might be running the play to the left. Some guys might be running a damn run, pass, whatever. Getting all 11 guys on the same page as an offensive coordinator in the spring is a little less than amazing. There's going to be guys that are going to be behind in the playbook, aren't going to understand things, understand concepts, understand different reads. And a lot of times if you have an offense that's based on reads, if only your quarterback makes the read and the receiver doesn't make the read, now you see your quarterback throwing a streak when the receiver's running a hitch. We saw that sometimes down at Jackson State, and you've seen that at other spring games. It's just early. So shout out to Shaw University and what they have going on. They play week 1 against Benedict College. Going to be a great matchup. It's a regional matchup, and I honestly think this bodes in favor for Shaw University. Now, the only difference in this game is going to be their front 7 for Benedict. Benedict's D-line dominated every team in the SIAC last year, no matter who you were. Tuskegee, you're at Albany, all these any team that played Benedict was dominated defensively because of that D-line, and I look forward to seeing how Benedict's D-line will play in this next year. So, moving on from Shaw, there's another team, another Division II team, and they are in the SIAC, and they had spring game this past week, and that's Savannah State. Savannah State doesn't have very big expectations, to be completely honest with you. They don't have very big expectations because last year we saw a very odd offense, and we saw an outlier in a game against Albany State where they played exceptionally well. They gave it up at the end, very close game, lose by 7, but they don't seem to be in contention, and they're less talked about in this whole conversation of who's going to win the SIAC. And you talk about the Benedicts and the Albany States and the Four Valleys. They're usually one of the less talked about teams. Now, the difference to me this year than the other year is that Savannah State brings back 68 players. That's the difference. Any program, Division I to Division II, bringing back over 60 players, including quarterback. They ain't just lose one player and that's a quarterback. They ain't lose that. They brought back them. They're all quarterbacks. this Savannah State team is an experienced team. Having an experienced team under the second year of your first-year head coach, Coach Kelton, means a lot. This Savannah State team maybe turn the page. This offense last year, very varied. It was more like a multiple offense last year. We saw some variations of the veer option, some variations of very strong power run-oriented formations, even under the center, in fact. And there were times last year we saw 5 wide. We saw a strictly spread attack. So I think that Coach Aaron Kelton and this offense, they really want to spread guys out, and they want to use a lot of read option principles. But I was not sure if Coach Aaron Kelton had all the weapons that he needed to properly run his offense. Going into this season, you bring back your quarterback. Well, you bring back almost all of them, right? They switched to a couple quarterbacks. But you bring back Jaden Adams, right? Jaden Adams looked very good. It's number 9. And these highlights, we're going to bring up some highlights. Let's go ahead and do it now. We'll bring up some highlights. Let you guys check out Savannah State and what they did during their spring game. Shout out to Preston Harvey. Let those play while we go. But Jaden Adams looked pretty good at quarterback. Oh, that's a little too big. Let's try this. All right. Yeah, Jaden Adams looked pretty good at quarterback. Kept the ball a couple times. He let it go. He had 2 passing touchdowns in this game. It's a lot of turnovers, a lot of celebration. This Savannah State team honestly looks very fun to play with. Saw some cool celebrations from both sides, the offense and the defense. But most importantly, I saw a lot of great execution by Savannah State. I saw a Savannah State team that was still using some of those same veer option philosophies, but also mixing them even more with spread and more passes downfield and really a more wide open offense, right? You open offense up. Take a look at this celebration right here. This is the one right here. Give it to him. Yeah, I like that. So that's Savannah State and what they did this year. They look pretty good out there in the spring game. For the SIAC, there are no more divisions. They have done away with divisions in the SIAC. So now they're just going to be the top 12 teams, and however they line up, that's how they line up. That, to me, is an advantage for Savannah State. Spoke about Bethune-Cookman and Coach Terry Sims earlier. Savannah State plays Bethune-Cookman week 2. Not very far regionally, pretty close matchup. And that's a Bethune-Cookman team that's rebuilding. This is a Savannah State team that's bringing back 68 players. It means something. It means something. Something to watch out for. Early on the Spaces, shout out to my guy D2. Early on the Spaces, we spoke about, Twitter Spaces, we spoke about SIAC versus SWAC matchups. That's going to be one of them. And for Savannah State, in order to win a game like that, you're going to need some consistency at quarterback. So I look forward to Savannah State choosing a quarterback going into the summer and really through the fall, having one guy, sticking with that one guy, and winning or losing with that one guy. Not a very big fan of the dual quarterback situation. I think that a lot of times having 2 quarterbacks is having no quarterbacks, and it could be a hindrance to the rest of the team because you're looking for leadership. And when you got to look at 2 different guys, it makes things a little different because that might be 2 different messages. Oh, man. So that has been most of my show for this week. I don't think I have anything left to give you guys. I feel like we ran through that pretty quick. Kind of want to go back through it again, right? But I want to thank everybody for tuning in with me, tapping in with Kelly Flicks, HBCU Flicks, on episode 2 of HBCU Flicks, the sports show. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment for me. Let me know how I did, how I can improve the show. I love hearing stuff like that. But stay tapped in. 323 Thursdays are coming soon. Interviews on Thursdays with California players in an HBCU. So don't forget to stay tapped in with me. I'm out of here. Peace.